Hi guys, Yuki here, back with Seduce Me 2, The Demon War, Eric's Route, Part 4. And we are in our room, and I think, scene that always comes up right before the beginning of the Demon War is gonna come up. So yeah, let's just get to it. To think this insanity has started with the spirit haunting my body was mind-blowing. How is that even possible? No one would ever believe that, but it happened to me of all people. Then I was kidnapped and taken to the demon world by the demon lord, trapped here unless he or I died. Another crazy, improbable event that managed to happen. This entire week had become a wild roller coaster ride of excitement that I would have never expected. Still, there was joy to be found in adventure, and my curiosity thanked destiny for letting me experience it. Now all I wanted to do was to get home and marry the man I loved. As Erik finally entered the room at last, I smiled and stood up tiredly. Erik chuckled before sitting down beside me and wrapping his arms around me.
Are you all right, princess?
Yeah, just tired. We held each other, locked in silence and unable to say anything more. We let the situation we had just gone through sink in, relieved that we were going to be happy from now on together. All we could do in that moment was hold each other and listen to our synchronized heartbeats. As the thought of tomorrow danced in my head, I began to grow fearful. Was I ready to go into battle? Was Erik? Were any of us, for that matter? We were about to walk into the final clash of a world war. Would we survive? Would I live to remain with Erik and feel his embrace again? Would tomorrow... It brought too many questions to think about, and I became frustrated and scared. Yeah, like I said before, I left Erik. I needed to hold him and treat the night like it was our last. Tomorrow was unpredictable, but tonight was guaranteed. Sorry. I ran my hands over his vest and looked into Erik's eyes, to see his meet mine in a loving gaze. He seemed to understand silently exactly what I wanted as he gently leaned in and kissed me. My eyes naturally closed, feeling the warmth of his embrace completely engulf me and draw me into a state of peace and comfort. The world around us vanished as I became lost in his arms. My fingers danced over each button of his shirt and released them as our kiss slowly deepened, revealing his bare chest and letting me feel the heat of his skin beneath my fingertips. His touches were gentle, sweet over my own clothes. The mutual need between us was as fluffy as a fairy tale, and, with nothing to hold me back anymore, we would drift into a blissful euphoria in each other's arms before the battle for my freedom began. It was moments like this where I felt Erik's unwavering devotion to make me feel pampered, pleasured, and all around blessed with his touches, his kiss, his breath against my skin. Still, his intricate hold on me only escalated as the clothes between us were tossed away from us, leaving us bare and leaving me in a wanton state of mind in his hands. I was perfect putty for him to meld, and every caress over my skin was paradise. My body drowned in ecstasy as his fingers massaged over my skin, his kisses over my shoulders, shooting little jolts of pleasure through my spine as our voices drifted to soft sighs and moans. I was his princess, and he was going to serve me every bit of his love, hugging me to him from behind and ravishing me as if he knew exactly what I wished to feel. He was just that intuitive to my feelings. That part of him was one of many reasons why I loved him. And even as his touches became more heated and his grip on me tightened, I could only release moans upon blissful cries within his lip. My fingers became laced in one of his hands as his other explored every sweet spot on my body. The ride became a misty haze of pleasure, my fingers on my free hand bearing him to his copper hair as his hold over my waist guided our lovemaking. The grip we had on our entwined hands tightened with each pulse of pleasure that rushed through us. Our names became a repeatable chant, echoing through the room as the air became filled with heat and the bittersweet smell of sweat. Any other sounds between us became carnal and wordless. We knew exactly what to do and how to drive each other to our joint pinnacle of pleasure. As we peeked over it, the loud cries we released became the sweetest thing that I had ever heard, burying itself into my memory. The afterglow was just as perfect. Erik's arms around my waist and his loving kisses over my cheek and neck. I love you. I will always love you. Erik smiled and nuzzled me before pulling me against his body, giving me his chest as a pillow to rest on. I gladly took it, nuzzling him and listening to the sound of his beautiful heartbeat pounding in his chest. His heartbeat pounded for me. I could hear the love beat in each pulse, and it made a smile dance over my skin. I became confident and filled with determination, ready for the day to follow. Tomorrow would decide everything. The day of the siege had finally dawned. We had arrived at the Demon Lord's castle, and we were as ready as we could be. Many armies, bearing different banners and colors, washed over the grounds before the castle, ready to rush in and lay waste to the Demon Lord and the remainder of his forces. All of us shared a common enemy, and upon his demise would finally be able to know some form of peace. Even during the roll call over the major generals, the air became full of determination and pride.
Mirth! Avarice! Nadia! Fiorna! Aradum!
Each name called became a mark on history. This was a war to bring freedom or destruction to the demon world. If the rebellion didn't win this fight, then this war would never end. If the rebellion won, then the world would be united in a hopefully peaceful rule. The hour before the battle was set to take place, my thoughts instantly ran back to our final meeting in Lilith's castle. Diana had pulled the leaders and us together, instructing us how exactly to proceed.
Zero, you will be joining Shadow and Sergeant in the front, taking care of the main army head-on. I expect that you will come out of it alive.
Yes, my lady.
Rabbit, Faye, you are in charge of range attacks and defense. We cannot allow any of those blasted imps getting to us from behind.
Yes, ma'am!
As Diana looked to me, I grew slightly fearful. I had to get into the Demon Lord's castle, but how exactly did Diana plan on getting me there?
You and your fiancé will take the side route straight to the castle.
Wait, huh?
We've organized our army to have our strongest on the front lines and against the tree line, giving us a side route for you to make your way straight to the castle.
If anything trickles into the side route, you'll be able to handle it. However, there is something I must ask of you.
What is it?
If you are indeed attacked, you need to defend your fiancé the entire way there. Do not let him use his energy.
Are you out of your mind?
When you get to the castle, I will be fighting one-on-one with the Demon Lord. If something should happen to me, then I need you to take over. She is not ready to fight him, and you need to be at full strength to finish him off.
She'll be okay. She's got my magic with her.
I stared, listening and reaffirming the order. I couldn't lie, I was nervous. However, I was determined even up to see this through. I looked over at my fiancé with a confident smile. I got this. Don't worry. Despite the worried look in his eyes, he nodded and held my hand, trusting me in my decision to agree with Diana's command. Diana rolled her shoulders and looked to the map draped over the war table between us all. Her gaze pierced into the parchment as the aura around her body pulsated in anger.
I will fly ahead and meet the Demon Lord head-on. No matter what happens, I will not allow that monster to live.
The pure determination and anger in her voice practically sent a shiver down my spine. She was sitting on seeing this through to the end, and I was sure that she was willing to even die if it meant taking the Demon Lord with her. The remaining incubi and the wives were asked to stay behind the army and guard the main base, where Rabbit and Faye were stationed. They needed to be as many eyes as possible in the back of the battle, so the four couples were perfect to keep things in check. As they agreed, the meeting ended and the mental preparation had begun. The idea of the upcoming battle scared me, sending shivers, waves of fear, and roaring up down my body in response to the thought.
So, my warrior princess, are you ready?
Yep. I want to say yes, but I'm scared. Erik gave me a comforting smile and gently leaned down and kissed my cheek, wrapping his arms around me softly.
I promise. I will protect you from anything that comes our way.
I listened to him speak before nodding and taking in a deep breath. Everything would be okay. We would be fine. I had to believe in myself and get us to the castle when the time was right. Like a beacon, our forces became the banner of hope and strength of the rebellion. At the sight of Diana, many soldiers bowed or stared in awe and inspiration. Maybe it was her presence, or maybe it was that she was for what she stood for. But as Diana stood at the cliffside of the mountain, the air became full of energy and power. My fiancé, Rabbit Faye, and I stood behind her as Diana stood at the ledge of the cliffside addressing the rebellion for their final battle. Her voice echoed across the field, booming and reverberating through the air like thunder.
Milites! Et hoc liberati isturei teramcun tuis omnibus conversiris! Sto vobiscum reducitic vos ad spem! Nocte! Lavabir mur! Arcem! Hostium sanguine!
What is she saying?
She said that she will help them gain their freedom, and she will stand with them as they fight this war.
Is that all?
Well, she also said that the castle will be bathed in blood, but I don't believe she means it literally.
I nodded as I stared at the back of Diana's head. A part of me felt a little intimidated and jealous of the power she had. She really could make armies bow to her and obey her every whim. At the same time, I knew that she was doing the right thing for this world.
Ele Dio dominati sunt nostri! Nos destruet, ium mitere, profundissimum, inferni detractos!
Rabbit and Faye stepped forward and held their hands out towards the castle, focusing their energies and forcing the stone walls around it to crumble and dissolve down into the earth. Diana summoned her saber, letting it shine brilliantly as the purple taint over her skin began to twist and turn. Before my eyes, the taint on her back took shape, lifting off of Diana's skin and morphed into a set of demonic wings. I could only stare, jaw dropped, as Diana's body lifted off the ground and began to fly over the legion, slowly gliding towards the castle.
To war! To battle!
After her final command, Diana's wings pulsated in the air, flapping gracefully as she swooped down and forward. She was charging and flying for the castle wall, saber bared and ready to spill blood. As the armies below began to bellow and march forward, Rabbit took hold of my shoulder and turned me away from the castle to face her.
Come, we must hurry.
Oh dang, when did Erik turn into his demon form? Understanding the need for urgency, I nodded and rushed forward to the rest of the incubi towards the slope down the mountainside.
Everything is in order. Sergeant Diana's guard are at the front lines, while Shadow is with his legion to the west.
Is our route clear?
We've done what we can to keep your way clear. We'll try to make sure the battle won't break through the path.
I nodded, feeling the needed rush nip at my heels, pushing me forward. My fiancé seemed to agree, gripping my hand and walking at my pace alongside me. However, as we finally arrived at the forest line, Faye and Rabbit stopped, looking back at us.
Straight through here. The sound of the war will always be on your right, so do not get lost. You'll be fine, though. Just follow the tree line.
In sync, my fiancé and I nodded in acknowledgement before turning to see the other brothers and their wives. So, this is it.
Remember your surroundings and protect each other.
Be careful, alright? Make sure you stay safe.
Kick his dead body a couple times for me, alright? Right in the head.
We'll be right here rooting for you and watching your back, okay?
We'll finish this and rush in as soon as we can, alright?
Make sure you kick some serious ass. Show that old goat what he gets for messing with you.
We'll win this. We know we can.
You can do this. We'll see you soon, okay?
I smiled despite the nerves running through my body. I held onto my fiancé's hand and gave it a hard squeeze before receiving one back in kind. We'll finish this. Then we'll go home. The grip nodded before I slowly turned and looked into the tree line, took a deep breath, and rushed forward. Matching my speed, my left followed, weaving through the trees behind me to not lose sight of me. The journey was surprisingly, dare I say it, peaceful? The sound of the war exploded beside us outside of the tree line, causing me to cover my ears a bit from the volume, but I shook my head and pressed forward, not wanting to become distracted. The goal was to get to the castle. I had to focus. As I rushed forward, I felt my instincts go aflutter, causing me to stop and remember that I could fly. The incubus skidded to a halt beside me, looking to me in out of breath of confusion.
Princess, what's wrong?
I looked up at him, staring into his eyes and contemplating my plan. It took a lot of energy out of me, but it was faster than running. Plus, I would be holding him with me, adding onto the weight. I took a moment before mentally hitting the forget button. I quickly grabbed my incubi's hand and pulled him close, tightly wrapping an arm around him and shooting a hand down to the ground. Fly! As my voice rang through the air, my feet suddenly were pushed up and off of the ground, pulling my incubus along with me and causing him to wrap his arms around me in utter surprise and fear of falling.
Whoa!
Our bodies shot into the air and above the trees to let us see the battle raging beside us. I stared in shock as the battle escalated between the two sides, slicing and ripping at each other for territory and ground. Still, the thought of the castle ran through my mind, causing me to shake my head and fly us forward, and the incubus in my arm held me tighter. It was a little cute to think about him holding me like this for once as I guided him through the air. Somebody needs to draw that. I knew that there were imps still in the forest below. However, as I glared into the trees and pointed a hand out, forming a familiar green orb in my hand and chucking it into the wood, I repeated the action over and over as we continued forward. I could faintly hear the sounds of the imps below becoming taut in my thorns, some even crying out from actually being impacted by one of the orbs and being cocooned by a thorny trap. I just thought of something, but no. That was really weird. No. Okay, I'll say it. It's awful though. So, we have our thorns / vines, and Erik has his tentacles? Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. Goodbye. My incubus, despite probably being surprised at my carnage, ignored the sounds below us and held me close to him, knowing that if he let go, he would fall. I wasn't focused on him at the moment. All I cared was about getting us to the castle. By the time we reached the end of the forest, there were a slew of dead bodies behind us, all entangled in a forest full of thorn bushes. I landed at the tree line, panting and feeling waves of exhaustion running through my body. I panted for air, slowly focusing on calming down as my energy quickly depleted from its continued usage to keep me in the air. That was all I could do before my energy was expended and a wave of exhaustion rolled through my body. I began to fall forward, exhausted. My fiancé, however, quickly rushed forward and caught me in his arms.
Whoa! Princess, are you okay?
Huh? I looked up to see Erik staring down at me with a deeply concerned gaze. We were safe for the moment, so I merely smiled up at him with a nod. I'm fine. I promise to protect you, like you protect me.
How long has it been down there? Evil human.
Yeah. Erik let out a small laugh, kissing my forehead and hugging me to him.
You spoil me so much, my love.
I hugged him back, feeling relief that we had arrived to the castle and we were about to rush inside. As we slowly pulled away, Erik lifted me up and helped me to my feet.
Will you be all right?
I nodded, shaking off the exhaustion from my mind. I was ready to end this. I looked up at the castle gates and felt a rush of determination run through me. Let's go finish this. With that, Erik and I rushed forward into the castle. The final battle had begun. Erik and I rushed into the castle and into the main hall, where we could hear Diana and the Demon Lord clashing swords.
I will tear you to shreds!
As we finally entered the space where the battle was happening, we stopped at the doorway, spotting Diana slamming her saber over and over onto the Demon Lord's sword, which was held over his head like a shield. From the look of it, the Demon Lord was severely wounded and was trying to hold out against Diana's barrage of blows. Diana wasn't looking too well herself, but she seemed to have the upper hand. What was scary was that Diana's face was completely smeared with blood, intensifying the frightening look of rage and anger in her eyes. Every swing was reckless, powerfully thrown to eventually hack into the Demon Lord. To her displeasure, the Demon Lord was able to block each time. Erik and I slowly stepped in, watching as Diana continued to beat steel to steel in an angry rage, trying to find an opening and becoming more enraged with each block the Demon Lord pulled. Slowly his body began to glow, pulsing with red energy.
Enough!
With a blast of red lightning, Diana was sent flying back, slamming against a pillar and falling to the ground with a thud.
Ah!
Diana! The Demon Lord seemed to ignore my shout as he stood and began to walk over towards Diana's fallen body. Diana tried to press up onto her hand, stumbling and buckling it before she glared up at the Demon Lord while he approached.
I should have waited until you came back, so I could have killed all of you in one fell swoop!
Ouch. Diana's glare intensified as large black and purple flames engulfed her body from the rage that ignited within her. I wonder when the spirit's gonna come into play.
You bastard!
Pouncing off the ground, Diana formed a new saber in her hand and flew at the Demon Lord, swinging it to slice his throat open. But the Demon Lord parried, locking steel once more with her and leaning in with a hard glare of his own.
How does it feel to be the only one left alive in your family? Not even your unborn sister survived!
Diana snarled as she snapped her feet into the Demon Lord's chest, forcing him back and causing her to catch herself on her wings, remaining in the air. The voice that erupted from Diana's mouth sent shivers down my spine.
You don't even deserve the mercy of death!
Erik instinctively placed an arm in front of me, staying put and watching intently. Both of us were sure that Diana possibly had this, but we didn't want to get in the way of her rage if she was full out going berserk. The Demon Lord let out a laugh before pointing his hand at Diana, summoning a large bolt of red lightning to shoot out and slam into Diana. Luckily, Diana had placed her sword between them and blocked the lightning from hitting her skin. Still, she was slammed back into the pillar she hit before and held there against the stream of heavy red lightning.
You're losing your power, succubus! Just like your weak parents!
With the tearful scream, Diana began to push back, shaking and gritting her teeth. The wounds on her body began to bleed profusely, but she eventually sent a wave of purple flame-like energy into her sword and letting it climb up to the lightning bolt into the Demon Lord's hand.
Ah!
The Demon Lord quickly pulled his hands away, revealing a sizzling and burning aura around his palm and fingers. Diana, weakened, fell to her knees, exhausted but not out yet. Her eyes still bore into the enemy, not ready to give up. I felt myself glare hard at the Demon Lord. He was a monster that needed to be stopped. Erik, feeling my anger, stepped forward and began to summon his ethereal tendrils behind his back and around his form.
Guess it's time to step in.
I watched as Erik rushed forward and planted his feet beside Diana, reeling his hands back and punching them forward. As he did, a crown of tendrils shot up and from the ground around his body and flew to the Demon Lord like a spray of arrows. The Demon Lord glared and sliced each attack out of the way, panting from exhaustion, but not ready to surrender. As he sliced through the last one, he sneered at his second son, gritting his teeth.
You!
Erik smirked, licking his lips slightly.
Did you miss me, father?
As he finished his sentence, Erik formed another round of spikes behind him and shot them towards his father, glaring as he blocked and knocked away each one against with his sword. The Demon Lord let out a dark chuckle.
Like I would miss little insect traitors like you!
The Demon Lord let out a howl before slamming his giant sword into the floor, causing the ground to quake and a large crack to cut through the marble. and charged at Erik's position. Erik jumped into the air and landed beside the broken earth, sending out another volley of spikes. Luckily, one rammed into the Demon Lord's shoulder, causing him to shout in pain.
Losing your touch, aren't you?
The Demon Lord snarled before ripping the spike out of his body, letting the wound bleed openly before rushing at his son with his sword held high. Poor Dinah swooped in and slammed her saber into the path of his sword, forming a deadlock.
I'm not finished with you!
Diana and the Demon Lord pushed against each other, eventually jumping away from each other in aggravation. As Diana landed beside Erik, he stepped in and pointed his hand to the ground, where his tendrils burrowed through the marble and jutted out like a spike trap. The Demon Lord was quick to react, rushing back before the spikes impaled him from below and glared. This match had become an unfair fight for him, but in our case, it was needed to finish him off at last.
Just as cocky as your mother! No wonder she was my least favorite!
Erik suddenly grew a dark face, the tendrils in his body glowing a red misty aura. Something snapped in Erik's emotions and the Demon Lord triggered it.
Don't worry. I'll send you to a place where you'll never have to see her again.
Erik and the Demon Lord then simultaneously rushed forward at each other, with the Demon Lord raising his sword high and Erik moving his tendrils to wrap around his blade. Erik and the Demon Lord went into a deadlock, with the Demon Lord trying to cut through the hold his tendrils had on his sword. Erik, however, formed more free tendrils and shot them up at the Demon Lord from below, causing his father to release his sword and jump back, now unarmed. Erik smirked as his tendril snapped the sword in half with insane ease and tossed the two halves to the side to be forgotten. I watched in anxiousness, hoping this battle would end soon. It was 2 against 1. The Demon Lord wasn't going to win. I, however, kept my distance to make sure he wouldn't attack me instead. I had no energy to fight. Taking in what Erik had done to his weapon, the Demon Lord snarled then.
I can beat you even without my sword! Remember who raised you, boy!
Erik let out a large bark of laugh as his tendrils sharpened into spikes once again. Yeah, you didn't raise him at all. You were just like, went off to another woman and that was it.
I'm afraid you're mistaken. My mother raised me. You were too busy doting on your favorite son to care about me or the others.
The Demon Lord growled, and his fist became engulfed in red bolts of lightning.
I created you! You owe your very existence to me!
I owe you nothing!
The Demon Lord only laughed before suddenly gasping from pain. I had barely seen what had happened, but as I stared at the Demon Lord, I gasped at the sight. Oh my god, it's like nobody shuts up today in this house. Protruding from the Demon Lord's chest were a spray of red spikes dripping with his blood. I could barely keep staring as he turned and looked to us in shock. I looked over to see Erik, to see him pointing at the wall behind the Demon Lord, where a collection of spikes jutted through the black void into the Demon Lord's back, effectively skewering him.
You never paid attention. You were blinded by pride, and that will be your downfall.
No! He's mine!
Oh no, are we gonna have to kill Diana? Erik quickly pulled back his tendrils from his father's body, causing the Demon Lord to fall forward from the pain and momentum. Diana, however, swooped at the Demon Lord and rammed her saber into his chest, and a garbled gasp escaped his throat. Without hesitating, Diana pulled her sword out and stabbed him once again, driving her blade all the way through him to the hilt and snarling into his face.
Those were for my parents.
A third stab, directly through the heart.
For my sister!
Diana finally pulled her sword out and rammed the pommel into the side of his head, pushing him down to the ground in a lifeless thud. He was dead by now, eyes glazed over in death's cold, breathless embrace. However, Diana didn't care. Diana quickly straddled his waist, bringing up her saber and using her magic to shorten to a dagger in her hands above her head. Oh no.
And for every life you took from this world!
Oh god. Oh god. Maddened, Diana began to violently slam and pepper stabs into the Demon Lord's chest. Erik rushed over and wrapped his arm around me, covering me from the sight, but he was unable to block the sound of Diana's sob-filled screams with each stab. I became a bit frightened at Diana and how she was releasing her anger. However, it was entirely justified. He had taken everything from her and had caused worldwide chaos. It was only natural to demand revenge even after death. This was her last stand with him, and she had dominated his very corpse with her blade, uncaring of the lost spirit no longer within it. It went on for far too long, to the point where Erik had to let me go and walk forward, pulling Diana off of him. She began to flail, dropping her knife and letting it fade as it hit the ground into nothing.
No! Let go!
Diana!
Erik pulled Diana to her feet and gripped her shoulders, shaking her and glaring into her eyes.
Enough!
Diana's eyes were bloodshot, desperate to keep striking the dead body, but filled with emotions and broken inhibition. As she finally took in Erik's words, she shut her eyes and dropped to her knees, releasing a wave of sobs and cries. I walked over to Erik's side, pitying Diana. She must have seen so much death. This was her solace and chance to let go. To know her family was gone because of him wrenched pain in my heart. But I knew that it was finally over. They were avenged, and so were the many people who died under his hand. The Demon Lord was dead at last. I felt a weight lift off of my heart and spirit, proving to me that the curse was broken, and the chain that bound me to the abyssal plains was gone. I could go home. I hugged Erik's arm to me, finally letting out the sigh I was holding the relief of the situation. Erik smiled and kissed my head.
It's over now.
Oh, man. Yeah. We can go home now. A wave of joy rushed through my body, happy to know that I was free to go home. I began to become overjoyed with the idea of returning, walking across the aisle, and marrying Erik before returning to my normal life. Life in the Demon World was an adventure, but it was time to finish this and leave. I smiled to Erik before kneeling down and placing a hand on Diana's shoulder as she cried, causing her to look up at me. I could only smile at her, trying to relieve some of the heartache and burden she was releasing. It's over, Diana. We won. A small breath of silence ran through the air before Diana wiped the tears from her eyes and nodded, still shaky from the experience.
It's over.
I nodded and gently helped Diana stand before taking Erik's hand and walking towards the entrance of the hall. Diana, however, turned back to the look at the Demon Lord's body, stopping us in our tracks.
Was this all worth it? I lost my family because of him. There was so much bloodshed.
Diana tightened a fist at her side and gritting her teeth and shutting her eyes.
I didn't get to say goodbye to my family. My sister.
I felt another wave of empathy run through my body at her words. She wasn't really alone, though. She had Zero. He was truly everything she had left in the world, and he was more than willing to walk through it with her. It was all right. It was all right, so I reached out to take her shoulder. Diana looked over, seeing the comfort in my eyes despite her broken gaze. Before I could speak, however, a familiar purple light glowed from the Demon Lord's body, catching our eyes and causing us all to look over in shock. What was happening? Are we finally in spirit closure? What the? Before our eyes, a faint purple orb slowly appeared and bobbed up and down in the air, looking to us. The orb that had haunted me and was expelled from me floated over the dead body of the Demon Lord as if it had been there the entire time. You! The orb moved in a circle around the Demon Lord's body, letting the faint trail behind it temporarily draw a circle in the air. As it returned to its spot, it released a pulse of light. The light slowly drifted towards Diana, impacting her chest and making her glow a bit before the light faded away. Confused, Diana stared at the spirit, trying to figure out what it had done to her. Was it an attack? Slowly, Diana became white at it in familiarity. With a shaky hand, Diana reached out towards the orb, lost emotion in her eyes as she kept her sights on the spirit.
Oh, Arabelle!
I stared at Diana in shock. It had a name? How did Diana know the spirit at all? It was like she was grasping at straws. How could Diana have known who it was? The orb floated forward, stopping in front of the Demon Lord's corpse as Diana took a step towards it.
Hi, Azair.
Is that her sister? I was wrong. Diana hit the nail on the head with its name, and it seemed to be acquainted with it. Diana took a couple more steps forward before dropping to her knees in the middle of the hall. I watched as tears began to stream down her face and her body began to quake. The orb slowly floated over to Diana and hovered just within arm's reach of her. Diana's hands shakily lifted up past her chest and over her mouth.
Oh, Arabelle!
It's okay. It's okay, big sister.
But she wasn't born. So how could she have... well, actually, probably, no. It's demons, that's all I say. I mean, yeah. Big sister? Diana was her... Diana suddenly let a tearful gasp before reaching forward and taking the orb into her arms, somehow pulling the orb into a tight embrace. The orb seemed to shimmer in the hug it was in, but it didn't seem to react in any other way. Diana, however, became a weeping mess, crying and shaking while holding Arabelle close.
Arabelle! Arabelle!
I couldn't believe it. The spirit was Arabelle, Diana's sister? What kind of coincidence was that? How did Diana not know herself? How did Arabelle not tell me? It obviously knew Diana just from how they were embracing. Still, the sight of Diana and mournful tears gripped to my heart. Diana lost her sister and suddenly was able to speak to her once more, even after Arabelle's death. It was as if fate wanted to apologize for taking her family away. I almost became a crying mess myself. It was a very tearful reunion after a dramatic battle. I didn't know how to feel in the situation we were in. Diana didn't seem to care as she continued to cry and hold Arabelle. Erik wrapped an arm around me, comforting me as I wiped my eyes and I tried to avoid weeping. Diana, however, didn't seem to care about the tears running down her face.
This is the first time I've heard you cry, sister.
I'm sorry. I tried to save you, but
It's okay. The Demon Lord did this to me.
It suddenly made sense. Arabelle was an unborn baby, so it wouldn't have known its name. The Demon Lord was the one who killed her, so the puzzle pieces were connecting perfectly. Arabelle then phased out of Diana's hand, making the demoness gasp and look up at the orb. Arabelle, however, floated in place in front of Diana as she continued to speak.
The Demon Lord made me find the human.
Oh. What? Arabelle was working for the Demon Lord? She helped the imps bring me to the Demon Lord world, bleh?
Arabelle, you were in the human all along? Why not just tell me? Why?
He made me. But now I have nowhere to go.
Oh, Arabelle.
Something in the air didn't seem right. Something about Arabelle became off and I couldn't place my finger on it. The more I stared, the more concerned I became and the heavier the nervousness in my gut grew.
Zaire, I love you so much. But...
The air seemed to freeze and the room became still as Arabelle floated back towards the body of the Demon Lord. As Arabelle stopped, she began to glow a dark red... No! Are you telling me? No! Color.
I can't forgive you.
Oh man, I thought we were done. All at once the orb flashed and vanished into thin air, only a misty gasp present in the aftermath.
Oribel!
We looked around, trying to pin down where she had gone. As the Demon Lord's hand suddenly lifted up and slammed into the ground, we shot our heads back to his corpse, seeing it begin to animate. The Demon Lord slammed his other hand to the ground and began to push himself up, curling his shoulders over and using whatever strength he had in getting onto his knees and eventually his feet. What? Man! The Demon Lord's body stood up and steadied itself on the ground on its 2 feet, heavy and void of life. What was happening? How could this be? As the Demon Lord's head lifted to look up at Diana, I gasped. His eyes were glossed over in a dark purple, almost black color. Blood continued to pour from the wounds on his body, but the body continued to move as if it had small breath of life. His mouth dropped and began to mold itself into forming words, dead and echoey with Oribel's voice seeping through.
You let him kill me. You let him kill mother and father.
Oribel!
Oh.
You let the human live and let us die. I can never forgive you.
The voice of the Demon Lord and Oribel seemed to fuse into a dissonant harmony as the body slowly began to march toward the unmoving Diana. My mind screamed for her to move and run, but Diana didn't seem to be immobile at the oncoming danger. Diana, move! She remained in place, shocked and frozen at what her sister had said and done. I could barely make out of her hair and body shuddering in natural fear, but she wouldn't move at all. Goodbye, cruel world, grabbed Diana. There was no way I was going to let Oribel hurt her, sister or not. I rushed forward and grabbed Diana by the horns, pulling her back as fast as I could.
Ah!
Diana gripped onto my hands, digging her nails into my skin, but I didn't care. I needed to bring her away from the incoming enemy. As I dragged her back, Oribel watched, amused by my intrusion. I could only glare back, despite Diana flailing in my hands. She wouldn't take her away. I wouldn't let her. I finally released Diana's horns and stepped forward, placing myself between the 2 sisters. I won't let you hurt her! Oribel loomed towards us, filling me with dread. The stench of the Demon Lord's corpse became unbearable, despite not being dead long. I still had no energy to fight, the realization making me step back from the undead Demon Lord.
You hurt me!
Hurt me.
Now I'll hurt you!
Oribel picked up the Demon Lord's broken blade parts and slammed them together, fusing them back into the sword with her energy. How was that possible? She was a spirit! Oribel then started to charge at us, raising the sword barely over Erik's and my head. I prepared to defend, but was blocked by the back of Erik's head in a wave of ethereal tendrils. All at once, the tendrils grabbed hold of the sword and forced it away. Around Erik's body was a deep aura of red and purple mist, swirling in the air and wrapping around his summoned tendrils. As he stepped forward, Oribel surprisingly stepped back.
I won't let you hurt the one I love.
With a snarl, Oribel lunged at Erik, trying to wrap her arms around him, but it was pushed away by Erik's tendrils. Oribel and Erik charged at one another, Oribel gripping to Erik's outstretched tendrils, and began to push at each other. The wounds on the Demon Lord's body began to open and bleed further, causing it to quake as it pushed against Erik's strength.
You won't last long in that body. Give up.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
With her screams, Oribel knocked away the tendrils before her and managed to get close to Erik, but not without impaling herself on traps Erik placed around him, which caused spikes to shoot up and into the rotten body of the Demon Lord. Disgusted at the sight and smell, Erik used his tendrils to shove Oribel off of him and towards the opposite end of the room, where Oribel slid and rolled against the marble, painting it red and black with blood. Quickly, Oribel jumped back and began to howl and scream, her cries filling the room and making it quake violently. I don't know. I held my head, trying to block out the sound, but her cries began to fill my head with dissonant pain. Erik, in defiance, sprayed a volley of spikes at her, all landing on target. The spikes remaining on a corpse, but Oribel continued to move, desperate to fight back with everything she had. What was wrong with her? How was she able to keep going? Were spirits really that powerful? I quickly grabbed Diana, pulling her up to her feet, and ran to the corner of the room, needing to be in the room still to help Erik, but desperate to keep Orville away from Diana.
Orville!
Is there a slap option around here? Cause we need to get her to focus. Diana began to flail and fight back, but I dug my nails into Diana's sides, forcing her back with gritted teeth. Diana, move! As Diana's back hit the corner of the room, I could hear Erik release a grunt of pain, causing me to look over my shoulder to see what had happened. Erik, having knocked away a slash from Orville's sword, unfortunately couldn't block a fist from sending Erik flying at the wall. Erik's body slammed into the stone and he fell onto the ground, gasping for air and curled over himself from the pain. Erik! I instantly rushed over and knelt to Erik's side, wrapping an arm over him as he slowly began to rise back up.
I'm fine, Princess.
Well, I feel useless. I shook my head and looked at Orville, seeing her slowly make her way towards us. I was certain that the body she was using was drained of any blood, yet she managed to keep it moving with her own energy. I was morbidly disgusted to see, but I was forced to bear witness as it came closer to where we were. What are we going to do? Erik and I stood to each other, desperate to find an answer in each other's eyes. However, one finally appeared in my mind. According to Diana, when I had Orville within me, I was overflowing with energy. If I was still standing, then I still had some left. There wasn't enough for me to fight, but there was enough to give to Erik to possibly help him. I suddenly grabbed Erik's face and kissed him, willing my energy into his body. Erik, despite naturally accepting it, stared wide at me in surprise. I didn't want to pass out, so I pulled away when I began to feel lightheaded. I hoped and prayed that this was enough energy to end this fight, so I smiled at Erik, nodding to him. Finish this so we can go home. I quickly collapsed onto my hands, panting for air. The room began to spin, but I had to shake it off. I had to see this through. Erik gazed at me before nodding and turning to Orville, who was halfway across the room now. Slowly, Erik rose to his feet and summoned his mob of tendrils, each dancing and waving like angry snakes in the air.
You've been in my way for long enough, spirit.
Walking forward, Erik lashed out his tendrils at Orville, whipping and snapping it at the body she was possessing and forcing it back despite her attempts to block and force them away. Every so often, a spike would fly from Erik's ring of tendrils, piercing into Orville like a skewer. As Erik passed the Demon Lord's sword, he reached down and picked it up, surprisingly with ease. I could barely stand, gripping onto the wall as I watched Erik put the sword to his side.
You possessed my wife, brought her to this world, and dared to attack her? All because of what my father did to you. Pitiful.
Orville let out a threatening and frightening shout, lurching forward to try and tackle Erik, but I was pushed away by the Demon Lord's blade and Erik's tendrils, causing her to knock into and collapse into one of the nearby pillars. Orville slowly rose, pushing the debris off of her before glaring hard at Erik. Erik glared back in kind before raising his father's blade up and to his side, preparing to charge forward with it to plunge into her.
I will send you to purgatory and free you from your suffering.
See, I actually felt sorry for the spirit for like a long time. I was like, no, maybe she's good. Nope. With one last cry, Erik ran and thrust the Demon Lord's sword forward into Orville, causing her to cry out. The room began to vibrate and quake, causing me to cover my head. However, Erik released the hilt of the sword and rushed back to me. A bright light filled the room, blinding Erik and I. Erik gripped onto me, trying to cover my body with his, but the white color of flash invaded my vision. Silence slowly consumed the air as my world became a blank, like canvas. I looked up to see the spirit orb bobbing up and down in the air.
You saved me! Thank you! You freed me at last!
I'm so confused. Orville. The orb spun around itself once, releasing a small giggle. It seemed overjoyed despite what had just happened earlier. Had Orville been under some sort of corruption?
I can finally go home!
Orville.
I turned my head to see Diana slowly walking forward to be by my side, staring at the orb in both sadness and relief. Oribel floated over to hover in front of Diana, a soft line of sadness in her own voice.
I'm sorry, big sister,
It's alright. You're free now.
Diana wrapped an arm around Oribel, laying her cheeks softly on the orb as it flickered a warm glow. The air was calm, and the love between Diana and Oribel seemed to hum with the orb's light. She could finally see her parent. However, Diana was still alive, and I could tell that this was her final goodbye to the sister she never got to meet. It was heartwarming as well as bittersweet, but Diana deserved proper closure with the sister she grew to love.
Tell Mother and Father that I'm alright, okay?
I will.
Oribel?
Oh, this hurt. Diana and I suddenly looked into the light around us, hearing a man's voice. Oribel spun around in a circle, letting out a happy gasp.
Father? Father!
Oribel quickly left Diana's arms and began to fly into the bright light, but stopped and spoke once more.
Take care of the world, okay? You're everyone's mother now, sister.
Aww. Diana grinned and chuckled a bit, stray tears falling down the sides of her face.
I'll do my best.
Bye-bye, human!
Bye! I couldn't help waving as the orb finally faded into the light. As the world returned to me, to the grand hall, I found myself still wrapped in Erik's arms. I looked up to see him staring down at me in worry, like I had passed out. Erik?
Love, are you alright?
I nodded. I was alright now. The battle was over, and I was free to return home. Great sacrifices were made, but it was all over. Now, I was going home. Diana, who had been sitting in the corner of the room, braced her knees to her chest, taking in what had happened as well. I was positive that she was truly there with me to say goodbye to Oribel, so she had to recuperate.
Sarah.
At her voice, a soft flash of light pulsed in front of her before revealing Sarah out of breath.
My lady!
Despite being out of breath, Sarah quickly dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around Diana. Aww.
I was on my way to tell you! We've won! We forced the enemy to dissolve and surrender and...
Oh, I want her to hug him and be like, let's go have a happy family together.
Shut up.
Sarah flinched before Diana wrapped her arms around his chest and pulled him tightly against her.
Just hold me.
Aww. Sarah stared down at Diana before nodding and embracing her, resting his head against hers comfortingly. I could barely hear soft sobbings from her, but I was glad to know that Sarah was there for her. I looked up to Erik and smiled before kissing him, relishing in the victory of the rebellion and the release of my curse. I was finally going home for the 4th time. Well, 3rd. It was over. The war was finally over. As the smoke cleared, we were victorious. The soldiers left standing were the ones to cheer in victory. The sky became littered with the howls and cries of the joyful and happy. The tyranny of the demon lord had ended. But what now? Home was now possible. We could go back to the human world and we could live our lives as we wanted. It was something I desperately wanted, and yet my body was not ready to make the journey just yet. We had to celebrate the success of the war after all. As the full moon rose over Lilith Castle towards the dawn, the entirety of the demon world celebrated with endless drink and food, laughter and dancing. It was so unreal, but the courtyard that I could see was full of smiles and happy faces. We had stayed for one more night, traveling back to Lilith Castle to rest and return home as healthy as we could be. After all, we had just gone through war. One more night in the demon world wasn't going to hurt us. While the majority of the rebellion danced in the courtyard, I remained with the incubi and the rebel leaders who were all in the royal hall having their own celebration. Drinks were shared and battle stories were exchanged, making some laugh and others roll their eyes. I found myself intrigued with the story Sergeant told me about the front line. As I looked to Diana, however, she simply kept quiet with a small smile on her face. She looked at the incubi and the rebel leaders in silence before walking away from the little party we had. As if she knew I was staring at her, Diana looked over at me and slightly gestured with her head to follow her. I've been doing it for the other one, so why not now? Again, follow her. I followed, curious as to where she was going. I made sure to remain quiet as I separated from the rest of the group and followed her out of the room and into the hall. The entire journey, Diana didn't speak a word. Even Sarah didn't follow her, most likely being told that she wanted to speak to me alone. Diana led me through the castle, up a couple set of stairs into what I looked like to be a royal bedroom with a balcony. Was this a guest room? It was untouched and I could smell the very faint scent of dust. Why did she bring me here? Diana stepped into the room, using her magic to ignite the candelabras and air out the room by opening the balcony window. Before I could ask, however, Diana finally spoke up.
I have to thank you, dear.
For what?
For aiding us in this war. We've been fighting the Demon Lord for so long. We thought the war would never end. As terrible as the circumstance was, if you hadn't been summoned here, we probably would have still been fighting now.
Diana walked to the balcony and leaned against the railing, staring at the dark night sky. The light from the room illuminated her form as she gazed at the stars. Despite the situation around us, the air seemed calm, with the faint echo of the celebrations whispering into the night. I walked over and stood beside her, leaning against the balcony, and looked at Diana as she smiled and let out a chuckle.
To be very honest, I didn't expect to ever see you again. After I took your energy that night, I vowed to never deal with humans again. No clairvoyance could have told me about you coming into play in this war.
What's with you and the ice? I wasn't exactly counting on coming here. But at least I gotta help bring peace here. Because that's mean. I don't want to have to say that it's mean. Diana smiled, nodding to me. I really was gonna help bring peace to a world. It wasn't out of pride or vanity. It was a matter of helping people clearly in need.
We owe you much thanks.
I'll accept your thanks when I finally get married.
Oh, I had almost forgotten.
I tilted my head to her. What was she talking about? Diana lifted one of her hands towards the sky and waved her hand through the air, making a soft purple mist glow around her fingers. Within seconds, the mist formed itself into a lavender-colored lily, resting peacefully between Diana's fingers. She brought it down and presented it with me with a kind gaze.
A gift, my dear.
A gift? I slowly took the flower out of Diana's hands and inspected it visually. It was light, but I could feel a soft glow of magic emanating from the stem and petals. The bloom reminded me of a human world lily, but something about it seemed otherworldly.
A flower known only to demons of Lilith. We call it the Flower of Lilith, because these flowers were said to have been created when Lilith first appeared in the abyssal plains.
I stared at Diana, and understanding why she was giving me such a gift. She chuckled at my confusion and leaned against the railing, continuing her explanation.
It is also a flower we succubi use when we marry.
Use? What do you mean? Diana chuckled again before she gently took the flower from my hands and tucked it behind my ear. As it settled against my ear, I felt a mist circle my head and form into a flower crown of lavender lilies. The way Diana looked at me made me feel like I was in my bridal wear already.
A human you may be, but Lilith would have been proud to see you marrying one of her own. These flowers represent her blessing, and may only crown the worthy.
I felt a blush run across my cheeks. This was a blessing? I slowly reached up and ran my fingers along the flower crown adorning my head, feeling the soft petals against my fingertips. They were almost pulsing with energy. I felt both flattered and honored that a simple flower felt that I was worthy enough to crown my head. Diana let out a sigh and looked back to the sky, making me do the same. One would have expected the sky to be full of smoke or smell of war's aftermath, but the sky was clear and fresh air drifted through my nose as I inhaled. I was indeed in another world, and tonight was my last night in it.
Well, you did it! Congratulations! You've made it to the end of your story. I have to say, I am very surprised at how it turned out. Nevertheless,
I'm glad things worked out in the end, whether it was for the better or otherwise. I mean, who would have thought that Diana's own sister was the one that brought you to the demon world? It's a small universe, isn't it?
Yeah.
However, your love came through in the end. With your strength, Erik was finally able to defeat Orabelle and send her to the afterlife, where she belonged. Anyways, you've been through a lot, so why don't we skip to... Huh? You want to know what happened after the war? Well, I mean, I guess I could tell you. After the war was finished, the entire rebellion celebrated. Word spread far and wide about the rebellion's success, and soon every kingdom in the abyssal plains had become united with the new authority. You would think demons would be more hostile towards each other, being demons and all, but the threat of the Demon Lord was what brought the entire world together. The entire world united under one banner, the Lilith Crest. Diana became the sovereign of the entire plane, accepted and loved by practically everyone because of her devotion to the world and her bravery in the war. Sero, as devoted as ever, remained by her side as her loyal bodyguard. Diana became one of the most beloved rulers in all of Demon World history. Her natural heart of gold led her to lead the world to a prosperous future, one filled with peace and happiness. The other rebel leaders supported her, eventually changing the caste system of the world and slowly working their way towards a plane as equal and peaceful as it could be.
Good to know that they didn't go with their plan of poisoning Diana.
Diana had her suspicions, of course, as any monarch would, but if they had any sort of bad thoughts about her before, they certainly didn't during the recreation of the world. And I believe that is everything that happened after, well, except for your story, anyway. Erik and you returned home, and since everything was taken care of before he found you, you got ready for the actual wedding.
Yay.
Huh? How do I know? Well, I have my ways. Maybe you should check it out.
Now that I was unhindered by a spirit I couldn't control, I was able to finally move on and say yes to Erik with every ounce of my heart in our wedding vows. My entire being became light as I watched his expression melt to endless joy at my vows to him. Our kiss was as magical as a fairy tale prince and princess kiss, glowing in positive and hopeful energy as the people who watched cheered in congratulations. I could go on and on about the wedding and the honeymoon, but honestly, after the war, I was more concerned with living my life afterwards. Our lives escalated to new heights after we officially became husband and wife. Erik started a chain of suit shops and had become a very powerful man in the fashion business industry. It was rather hilarious to see him square up James every fitting he needed with a smirk of equal standing to his once upper-tier brother. As for me, I began to go through my own success in life, dedicating myself to becoming exactly what I wanted to be. After all, my husband had made a name for himself in the fashion world. If I put the same amount of work in as I did in the demon world, then I was going to be okay. Also, this is like kind of having to do with Erik and James's relationship, about him feeling like, you know, like second sign, nobody cares. You're just kind of there if James something happens to him, but then they all left. And when he was talking to his dad or the demon lord about it, there was a hint of, well, not hint, you could blatantly tell that he was unhappy with the way things were when they were there, but obviously he's a bad guy, so it doesn't matter about the demon lord. But it's good to know that despite everything that he went through, that him and his brother still have a good relationship. But I digress. However, there was never a day that went by that I didn't think about what was happening in the abyssal plains. It was a heavy chapter of my life, one that tested the love between me and Erik. To think that I was under the influence of a child who needed to be set free still astounded me to no end. For a moment, I myself almost believed that I was pregnant instead. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. Still, I was confident that I would get through it and stay together no matter what came our way. demon, devil, spirit, it didn't matter to us. We were unstoppable together. The faint memory of my own power slightly tingled through me every time I grew confident, eagerly reminding me that I had strength of my own. I would never let anyone come between me and Erik ever again. The thought of it all echoed in my mind as I sat in bed, looking up at the ceiling with a wide smile on my face. Despite the dangers of being real, the war was an adventure fun to look back upon in my memories. I took in a deep breath and let out a sigh, leaning back against the bedpost and closing my eyes. I was at peace and everything was all right.
Princess?
Somebody has the case of bedhead. I opened my eyes at the sound of my pet name, looking up to see Erik at the door, smiling at me. Oh, he just got a bedhead, or he just got out of the shower, or both. To see Erik at the door smiling at me and holding a plate of food. Unlike the demon world, this world had the makings of pastries, eggs, bacon, and sausage, and other delicious concoctions made for the early morning. As I took in the sight of all of my favorite foods on the plate in Erik's hand, I licked my lips and let out a happy hum. Hey, thanks. Hey, that looks delicious.
And it's all for you.
I was squealing internally, feeling a bit spoiled at the treatment he was giving me. As he walked over and sat on the edge of the bed, Erik handed me the plate and watched as I accepted it and took a bite of what he offered, groaning at the amazing taste. With a smile, I took some of it onto the fork that was on my plate and offered it to Erik, seeing him stare at me in slight surprise before smiling, taking the bite, licking his lips after. Thank you, Erik. You spoil me.
Anything for you, my sweet princess.
I giggled at the name, nuzzling Erik's hand as he came up to caress my cheek lovingly. His hands were always so soft and warm and perfect to hold me and made me feel loved and safe. I opened an eye to look up at him cutely, seeing him blush with a smile of his own.
I would happily do anything for you.
Anything?
Anything. Just name it.
I cupped his hand and gently placed a kiss over his palm, feeling him stare in surprise at the gesture. I could almost hear the blush on his face intensifying before I could even look back at him to confirm it. He was as red as an apple. Perfect. I giggled again and nuzzled his hand, almost laying my head on it. Be with me forever? It took a small cute moment for Erik to regain his composure before nodding, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear.
Forever. And always.
Aww. Hold me every day and every night?
As close as I can hold you to me.
Sweet waves of joy rushed through me every answer he gave, confirming his devotion and love for me. I was so lucky to have him as my own, and I could tell that he believed himself to be the lucky one. Guess we're going through wedding vows again. In honesty, we were both the lucky ones, perfectly blending together and devoting ourselves to each other without second thoughts. We proved it in the demon world, and we would prove it for the rest of our lives. I gently pulled Erik towards me, moving the plate between us to the nightstand and smiling as he came close before capturing his lips with mine in a loving kiss. He was definitely surprised, but it wasn't long before he began to kiss back just as passionately. The gentle taste of roses and rain always made me feel at peace, and I always managed to find it on Erik's lips. He was my perfect prince, and I was his loving princess. Our mansion was our castle, and the human world was our kingdom to explore. What story could have been better? As we gently pulled away, we gazed into each other's eyes, becoming lost in them. All I could see in his purple irises were waves of love and care, filling my heart with everlasting peace. I began to wonder what he saw in my eyes. Whatever it was, became entranced and could do nothing but wrap his free arm around me, pulling me to him lovingly.
Everything in my life belongs to you. My heart, my body, my soul. Everything. I swear to give you everything I am, and love you until the end of time. Nothing will tear me away from you.
Erik. With a tender kiss on my forehead, Erik's expression softened to a gaze of deep love.
I love you, princess. I love you so much.
Man, now I'm tearing up a little bit. I believed every word. I let his eyes embed themselves into my heart, and I would remember them forever. As Erik kissed me again, locking lips with mine, he sealed his words. I would love him and continue to hold him close for the rest of my life. Nothing would be able to tear me away from him any longer. And that was my perfectly happily ever after. And hopelessly devoted to you, I. Let me write that down. Actually, I probably write it down on a piece of paper. And that concludes Erik's route. That's like, I feel like this is like longer than most videos. Yeah, it's like an hour and 10 minutes. So I guess sorry for people who probably don't have the time to watch a full hour. You guys could probably break it up later. I know I'm notorious for long videos. But yeah, I mean, it was a good route, but for me, my favorite route would be Damien. Even as sweet as Erik is. But aside from that, it's a good ending. We made it. Somehow. I was really worried there. But yeah, that's that. And now we will be moving on to Sam's route. Oh boy. I have a feeling that since Sam is the main guy, that his is probably going to have even more content than what we would get with the other ones. So we shall see what is going to happen. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!